So these discussions are not closed discussion between the panelists. We would like to have participation from every one of these rooms. We would like for you to know that it's an open discussion, that we would like to have participation from anyone. Well, first of all, we are going to thank, and I would like to express my appreciation to the two working groups chaired by Noemi and Joseph, who has produced a set of questions that the panelists are going to answer or try to contribute to solve this. So the main questions have been the result of this very hard work that have been in the last hour produced a number of questions. So I will start right now to ask 2 or 3 major questions, and I would like the panelists to think about that, and in a voluntary basis we will try to get the question. The first is, do the space agencies include awareness building and education in their overall planning? This is the first question. Please, anyone from the panelists would like to start?
The question was, do the providers basically have training capacity? We did have a little bit of a support in the past, just on an introduction side. The rest of the thing is left to the local or to your own initiative.
Well, in the case of CONEDA, the Caribbean Space Agency, we have the Center of Training, like my partner. It's a basic training, but the question is what we need, what kind of training we need in the case of disasters or management of disasters. I think this kind of training must be specific, and it must be not too deep, like a post-grade or like this kind of studies. I think
More practical things.
Practical
operational
things.
Yes.
Well, just as Bruno already mentioned, how people are recruited because they are specialists in certain areas. And we have a continuous, what we call internal university program and so on to stay up to date. Here we are talking about a complete new area, as you just mentioned, in the field of disasters. Now, the problem then is, of course, that our people, when they are working in this area, contribute in this area, must have some basic understanding of the problems. On the other hand, ESA is not a solution for everything. ESA is not an operator nor a service provider. So the only thing we must be able to understand and pass on is how the systems work and how the systems should work together. Not more than that. So yes, there is basic understanding, but the only understanding that we need is to make sure that what the emergency services, the regional or local authorities need as tools that we understand them and prepare them. It's not an initiative as such for us.
Well, I think we look at from experience in Nigeria, the 3 arms of government, the federal, the state, and the local government. We have an agency directly charged with disaster management, and there is a good rapport, relationship between that agency and the space agency. And disaster management is approached at the 3 levels of government. So we do, through that rapport and relationship that we have, we usually organize training at the local government level, particularly in the areas of environmental management, knowing fully that some of these can translate to disaster if not properly managed. And at the same time, the agency charged with disaster management do have a lot of awareness and training programs for the local, at the local government level of disaster management.
Well, in Argentina, as an example, we have now a training postgraduate course that is 2 years long for people of different areas, in which some civil protection agency staff has subscribed. In parallel, there is a university in Buenos Aires that is training people exclusively, not in remote sensing, instead of this in emergency management. The University of Buenos Aires people is going in 2 days to the ground station and meet and know about remote sensing a bit. And these two initiatives have been started close to 1 year ago in our side in the space agency, and in the other side is more has more time going on. But this is one experience on the use of university staff and space agency people working together with some experience on emergency management. This is 2 years postgraduate on emergency management using remote sensing techniques.
Yes, my friend, please.
Yes, the experience in Sri Lanka has been that, as I mentioned in my presentation in the morning, of course, in the aftermath of the tsunami, this area of training and education in disaster management has assumed a higher priority in the country. So as a result of that, there are some training programs and particularly some postgraduate research programs have commenced in some of the universities supported by certain agencies. So there aren't any undergraduate level courses, but a couple of research programs at postgraduate level. In addition to that, there's a certain degree of operational training that takes place at the level of operational staff of the disaster management agencies. There's an agency called Disaster Management Center that operates under a separate ministry. So there are some training programs that are organized by that. And as to the link between the disaster management community and the communication community, of course, some of these training programs try to address this link between the disaster management community and the communication community, but not in a very big way. There are some exercises, some group exercises and things like that that were involved in these training programs that were conducted.
Okay. For Thailand, actually the Geoinformatics and Space Technology Development Agency, we are performing the what we call data provider. We have the cloud receiving station to receive the data in the region. We are since we operate the cloud station since 1981, more than 25 years. And actually, the you have seen my colleague presentation. You can see that the we also have the we are working with the other government department to cope with the natural disaster. We also have the training course. We conduct the training course for the private sector and also the people from the local administration as well as the former private sector. We conduct the 14 courses a year for the basic remote sensing training course and also the what we call geoinformatics. Training around the 2,000 people, 2,000 people a year. Mm-hmm. We also conduct the training course. Okay. For the disaster, we are working with the user community. Yes. Yeah. All right. My question is, are you satisfied with the international cooperation in terms of the capacity building? Something more to offer? Do you have particular ideas in how we can approach capacity building in terms of the regional perspective or international, pure international cooperation? This is something that is important, a message that we have to give to them. Please.
Well, I think the UN, for example, has some capacity building institutions. I know of the English-speaking regional education in space science and technology for English-speaking in Nigeria and French in Morocco. Even though we cannot specifically say they are not sufficient, but the area that I would want to advise is the curriculum of these institutions to include disaster management. I know that they have curriculum that generally gives more education and capacity building in the area of remote sensing, GIS, communication, GNSS, metrology and the rest for various applications. But emphasis should be laid in disaster management in the curriculum of these UN institutions.
And under the UN's 5-year program,
Okay. This is important.
yes, under UN USA, we are implementing outreach and awareness building activities which have already been approved by the General Assembly. And these activities include workshops, expert meetings, training courses, summer school seminars, symposium for policymakers. So we have a list, it's in the General Assembly resolution.
Okay.
But whether this is sufficient,
Yes.
you know?
Yes, but this is an important aspect also we can put as a recommendation. We have something, but we need something else, something additional. We need something more. Someone else also from the floor, an additional idea?
Maybe just one small point, because I'm trying also to translate this into what this means for Europe. And you saw me already earlier hesitating a little bit, what is the role of Europe?
Yes.
And although disasters normally don't know borders, it is very strange to see that you have specialized being trained in a country, because it all depends on the civil protection authorities and so on. And I think it is time that we go look a little bit across the borders and make sure that that groups of people are trained together in regions wherever in the world. This is not limited to Europe, but it could be in almost any area, I think. We very seldom have local disasters. Well, it must be a very big country.
I think you touched on an important point, which is the regional aspects.
Yeah.
We have a few initiatives everywhere, so we have to encourage to continue those particular efforts. Yes, excellent. Okay, there is an important aspect to, yes, please.
Just one question.
Philip.
In regards to management, there's management.
Yeah.
And anytime we talk about management, we talk about performance.
Yes.
When you talk about performance, you talk about measurement of the performance. So my question here is, since we have heard that some things courses were organized since 1981, I mean, these things have not been created a year ago, so it has a long experience already. Is that, and you say we have something, I mean, Maslan just mentioned that you're doing something. How do you, when you say you want more against what, and how do you measure what you have already, and how you can qualify exactly whether, to measure what you're missing? I think this is
It's a key question, yes.
Question
yes.
of evaluation.
Yes, yes.
Is there anyone on the panel has an evaluation system of this disaster management?
Yes, please.
May I just say that all the educational side of it on a disaster management was more a reaction to be geared to answer management and to manage the disaster itself. On the remote sensing side of it, on Earth observation, we don't have that strong capability or strong to be prepared enough. You know, it's using remote sensing to help as a tool towards risk management and vulnerability mapping or whatever it is, that part of it is in infancy in comparison to all the other management schooling you get on how to cope with disaster.
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Yes, please, please, please. More than happy to receive your reaction, please.
Just to mention also that the International Charter is very much working on a regional basis as well and promoting regional networks. European Space Agency is training authorised users from Civil Protection Agency and agencies in the coming months. And I think my colleague from the Charter, Gabriel, is being very modest. He's instituted a programme of training project managers to use remote sensing data within South America, and that's an approach we're also taking in West Africa and many other regions as well.
Excellent contribution, please.
Really,
The floor is
I want to
open.
add something
Yes,
that,
please.
inviting all the countries in South and Central America, and there was a pool of approximately 20 people coming from different countries to train specifically in the operational aspects of the charter activation. This is oriented specifically for civil protection agencies. And there was an evaluation for this team, not for the overall system, for this team. And this evaluation was improved by ESA collaboration and by US collaboration also, because the USGS secretariat member was also contributing to this effort. And this course that was first done in 2006 was repeated in USGS in USA 2 times, in Nigeria, and I think and in Costa Rica this year. This is the 6th or the 5th version of the training course, that is exclusively for the operational aspects of the charter. It supposes that some background on remote sensing is present. In some cases, the Civil Protection Agency has no people with this background, and they send somebody from the scientific area, normally, to train on the specific aspects of operational, because he has also the ground remote sensing processing capability and knowledge. Then this is the idea to integrate the two areas. And the evaluation is normally the charter has accepted the evaluation prepared by all the agencies together, and is issued systematically in each training course.
Okay, please.
Thank you, Gabriel. Just a short question regarding this kind of training. How is possible to apply for this training? Is it by invitation only to certain institutions, or is open for anybody interested?
Specifically for the charter, as it was done through the Foreign Office channels that we respect, and we don't interfere with this mechanism, the invitation was sent to the country. Then there was some conditions to apply for this, the English knowledge, remote sensing capability. This is the condition, but it's not strictly restricted. But the condition was that the request is sent to the Civil Protection Agency. We have an experience in which one of our project managers has also some connection with UN Spider, and we have in the same person the two functions, PM and UN Spider point of contact.
How do we know how well we are doing? My thought on this is with the, let's say, the charter, the way they assess the performance is maybe how fast do they get the data to the disaster management community. But with the UN Spider, for instance, our performance would be judged on how many disaster managers are we able to inform about the charter, and who will eventually trigger the charter.
Yes.
So we are working on this.
I think this is an important aspect, because I was participating in Barbados seminar in Spider, and in fact the participants wanted to know exactly this particular aspect of the platform, because this is an important key aspect. Excellent. An important aspect that has been underlined by many people during the whole seminar or workshop is the relations between a space community and disaster management community. There are a number of questions here. For instance, if there is a common interface for communication between a space community and disaster management civil protection organization? Is a space community fully aware of users' needs, and requirement of services? What kind of data are required? I have 10, 11 questions, but I don't want to ask all of them. I just want to have the reaction, the essential thoughts about the communication between these two communities. Who wants to start with this particular question? You? Yes? All right. Anyone? Voluntary basis is here. Anyone? Yes, please.
For instance, in the case of Peru, we have civilian defense, an organization which is in charge of, in case of any disaster, they handle the disaster. But I think they focuses just when the disaster occurred. They took a few actions in order to prevent. Maybe they prevent to locations, maybe they send news about possibilities of disasters, but they don't take care about much information about like this kind of satellite images. In our case, we have a link with this organization, but they uses a few information that we can get them. So the relation between space agency, in our case, with this kind of organization is not too much strong, you know. I think they ask us just when the situation is necessary.
Okay.
Not.
It's not enough. It's not
Yes.
sufficient. Okay. Who wants? Joseph, you want to share?
Well, the gap is there, particularly for many developing countries, and this gap needs to be closed. And part of the reason for the gap is lack of knowledge, complete knowledge of what to do. In many developing countries, for example, when there's a disaster, what most government officials used to do, particularly the disaster management agency responsible, is to take delivery, emergency delivery and so on, like mattresses, food and the rest of it. And even when you have to deliver relief to the disaster people, community, you still need space data to guide this. To determine where you have to relocate and do all the rest of it. And then you need space data to monitor the evolution. But this gap is still existing in most developing countries. And it's maybe through the spider now with a lot of awareness, perhaps this can go ahead.
Okay.
Closing this.
But you feel that this is a gap that we have to propose some solution in order to have a better dialogue with this committee. Yes.
An harmony.
Yes. Okay. Tanat, what's your experience in that?
Well, very briefly, yes, as for the gap, yes, that does exist. As in the case of many developing countries, it also does exist in Sri Lanka. But I would say, I mean, it's given the stage of evolution of this whole thing, I mean, integration of disaster management mechanisms with the communication facilities. Of course, At the early stages of evolution, it's natural, I would guess, for the disaster management community to look at the communication facilities as just another set of facilities, not as an integral set of, as an integral part of the total system that has to be in place in order to take control of the situation. So I think this is happening right now. This is the beginning to happen right now. So in due course, communication entities also will be identified as an integral part of the disaster management.
Because there are two sides of the equation. The internal domestic communication between the entities and between those entities and the outside actors or players, international bodies, for instance. This is an important aspect also we have to see. What is your opinion about that?
Actually, the common interface between the space community and the what do you call the I say that the user community in Thailand. We usually say that because Thailand from the user community point of view, actually the we are the we are emphasize on the data application, but we start with the ground receiving station. It means that we have the interface with the space community, with the what do you call the US, like from USGS or from NASA, from NOAA. We working with those organizations, and the at the same time we also we learn from them, but it takes time. It takes time, and for Thailand we are act as the what do you call data provider. We are working with we are working with the our what do you call user community. It's fortunately.
Okay. And Bruno, will you say something about how to improve this dialogue? If you think that is something is necessary to be done.
We are lucky because depending on what kind of management to come across, in our disaster management, we recognized remote sensing has been a technical tool to extend whatever we need now. We have a lot of other challenges, of course, apart from that, but it has been recognized as being a contributor towards disaster management. And so the drive is there now, as we have already. There's a risk, of course, if you leave it alone, there's a chance that it can die. So you need to have the champions to go and carry on and moving it forward. And of course, you have to have a backing upwards as well. Just, as I said, we spoke about data and accessibility of data. With whatever promise you make, you must also be able to deliver in that sense. So, but we are lucky in South Africa that our disaster management people are perfectly aware of what remote sensing can bring towards disaster management. So it's a little bit of an easier work. Just have to get the mechanism.
I want to add something related with the relationship between the civil protection agencies or end users in general that could use the information, not specifically the civil protection agencies. We started a program, organised started a program in 1998 in which people that are working in emergencies in different layers, in municipal, provincial, national, will receive images free for specific emergency applications. And we have a very good response from people related with flooding. We have a lot of floodings. And fire communities start using specifically the hotspot detection of MODIS, in which you can get the coordinates of the points, hotspots. And along, let's say, close to 9 years of providing information and receiving reports on the use of it that are in our web page, there are a lot of people that know the resource and use it, and in some cases produce very interesting reports on the use of the IMO system. This is a way in which the agency tries to, let's say, open the access to the data to promote the use of it specifically in emergencies. In any case, it's not a perfect system because all the system has some some flaws, some problems, but the reports we get shows specifically very interesting use in floodings and in the forest fires.
So, do you think that something can be improved there in your particular case, or have you seen in Latin America, for instance, cases in which the relation between the two communities are not enough good that we can improve something in your experiences?
Well, I've heard the words of Wolfgang
Yes.
This year and last years, and I don't know, because I want not to identify some specific case because it's not correct, but in any case I think that civil protection agencies have a special mandate, operational mandate, and must solve problems very fast. And on the remote sensing community, accepting the ground station operations that are must be very, very precise and tightened. The other parts of the agency are normally not so trained to operational aspects, and in any case they are delivering images. And this is the main, I think this is the main mandate for the agents, to provide the images.
Okay.
And the other expertise aspects could be supplied if the agencies speak like ISA or USGS or something like this, but for small agencies, the main objective is to provide the best access and free access for emergencies.
Free access, free access. Wonderful words, free access.
Because our program is free access. In 1998 until 2008 is working, and people for flooding is close to 1,000 images each year. Right? Because it's focused not only in response, it's prevention, monitoring. You know, we have floodings each 5 years in the most productive area of the country. Then it is it's not easy to manage the way in which you provide images and the feedback you receive and the use of the images, and could be abuses or something like this. But you are going through this risk. You are getting positive results from the institutions that are usually seriously data.
Yes. It seems that we are living in a mixed kind of system in which there are free access to image, but also a market with image. And that is something that probably in the end we have to study the new actors who are participating in the whole process, the private sector. The private sector, how we understand the participation, how we can be better consumers in the end. This is important to protect interests of, especially in developing countries. But
as we can see from a number of presentations made here, disaster management involves practically much more technologies. It's communication and GNSS. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on other technologies.
If we talk about disasters, make a distinction between a disaster, an event, when it is happening. And there, indeed, I think there is still quite some things that can be done by the space community, and where the disaster management community can still learn. I'm glad to see that there is so much structured cooperation already in many countries, and that's good. But I still think that there are more applications and indeed the integrated use of applications that can be of much use. And there I think the space community can do still a lot and help the disaster managers not only with remote sensing data but also with other tools. That's one thing. The other thing is that, and we have seen these beautiful graphs over the last 2 days, is that there is more than just the event in the disaster. I think there is a very important area. Preventing a disaster, I think, is very difficult. Maybe occasionally, but at least early warning. And there, I think we're going to have maybe some less integrated approaches, but there's an enormous responsibility for the remote sensing community to make data available, to put the archives at their disposal and help developing models which will allow to identify a trend an upcoming emergency situation and maybe take appropriate measures. I think those are two aspects to it, and we should perhaps work more in developing computer models to be in a position to forecast and take perhaps sufficient measures to avoid catastrophes. That's a new area I think that we should develop much more.
Yes, interesting. But one of the things also that impressed me was the reflection dealing with experience. I think we don't have, as far as I understood the whole problem, a register of experience or of modeling, of pilot experience that can be used in the future to combine historical data with new data. An experience that has to be not only the result of information in terms of numbers, but also experience of people. I think in many developing countries, that is an important tool that sometimes is forgotten, but still remain an important aspect. Maybe just...
Well, I think I want to agree with you and also suggest that this is an area where we can bridge this gap between the space communities and the disaster community, particularly the area of historical antecedents of occurrences, and even from the simple knowledge of land use, land planning, or preparation of land use, land planning maps, and land use, land cover maps, and concentrating in the areas of environmental management and areas of prevention in particular. If we have knowledge of a particular disaster, and then we should be able to prevent the occurrence of that kind of, like take an example, a flooding. We must, through the knowledge of the historical aspect of that flooding, we should be able to provide liaise with the disaster management agency and Ministry of Environment, for example, to provide existing data that can be used to prevent that kind of flooding in the areas of floodplains management and so on. I think these are areas where the developing countries should concentrate. I know that we cannot avoid emergency occurrences, but a lot of steady achievements in the area of bridging this gap can be done in the areas of prevention.
Excellent. I think Gabriel mentioned before the question of the effect of the Niño in Argentina in the flooding. Can you share with us also that experience?
Okay, well, each 4 or 5 years, we have in La Plata Basin that affects 6 countries. Specifically, in Argentina affects close to 4 provinces. We have flooding each 4 or 5 years. Then the National Water Institute knows that we are in 2004 and probably in 2008 or 2009 we will have this event again. And normally the rivers and the areas that are under risk are the same. And there are a lot of work done by specifically the most sensitive and some another tools like mimeographs and some measurements of the river, in which we have a lot of knowledge on the effects, at least on the effects of the event. Then we are not speaking about early warning, but we are close to this work because we have some periodically repeat of the events.
Okay. Yes, please.
Additional about the gap between space agencies and the disaster management agencies, there is another problem we faced, especially in Syria. Is problems obtaining the data, remote sensing data, in needed time for different reasons. Some of this is costly data, especially for high resolution data, and the other reason for political reason. So how can you help these countries to obtain this kind of data to analyze their problems, to produce whatever thematic maps for them, provide them for data or reduce the prices. I don't.
Reduce the prices. We insist on that. You want
just to contribute to what he has said, I think the commercial satellite operators are not even helping the developing countries in this area because they want to make money. And they go with their data to developing countries and they will sell to as many organizations as possible the same data. I think like Nigeria is trying, the federal government in Nigeria, for example, has approved that the space agency remain the repository for all satellite data in the country. So before you can carry out any satellite-based project, you must come to the space agency. The space agency now determines what is available in the archive. That you don't need to go and repeat. Repeat, same cost, and then you can share whatever resources is available. So that's an area that the developing countries should be looking into.
I mean costly data, not costly the data itself. We couldn't buy the data from the owner of the satellite directly. We buy the data from the market. So this is also an additional prices.
Because there are many people in between.
Yeah, many people, they want to
have their commission.
I think it's better if we can buy the data from the satellite owners companies. Became more cheaper maybe, or became more, can't find.
I would like to hear the opinion of the industry, of the private sector. There is someone here who can say a few thoughts about this approach. Just to provoke a discussion. Yes, please, go on.
By all means, it's the nature of a commercial industry is that if it's sustainable, it has to cover its costs, and therefore a charge has to be made. But clearly, the challenge is to try to make EO sustainable, and one of the approaches that we're trying to pursue in that is lowering the cost of the infrastructure itself, which of course is what has been pioneered in small satellites. So that approach will be trying to bring Earth observation to be available much more at a reasonable cost and much more widely available, both for national use and for commercial use. Is I think something that we're beginning to see the benefits of now as space tools become more widely available. This is very much really developing from the marketplace. So it's benefits as well as seeing, I think, from the development of the commercial arena and moving away from being major national programs. So I hope some of these benefits will become more apparent as a result of the change we've been going through over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yes, thank you very much for contributing to the discussion. Because it's, yes, please.
Two remarks. First is the interfacing between the satellite data provider and the user agency.
The dialogue between these two, yes.
There must be some agency control who takes the data from the satellite station or satellite data provider and distribute the data to the user community. It has some standardization also and collect not only the satellite data but other ancillary data from the user side also if they have about the disaster prone areas and make the database, comprehensive database their own and provide these databases to the disaster management agencies and other agencies at the time of this. Secondly, the historical data. Today's data is the history for the tomorrow also. So we can use the today's data for tomorrow as a historical data.
Sure.
So you can start mapping of the flood or disaster prone area today and you can use this data tomorrow if any disaster happens.
Yes. So to combine this historical data. someone else, I think you want to say something? Yes.
Institutions like ISA, for example, and brings images low prices, or they make some subventions. When you bring studies about projects which service with some proposals, for instance, the Amazon River and how it could be a risk, for instance, in certain locations, or maybe the glacier step back in some places. So, and we must know what we want, and if it become a risk in the future, we can present a project to ISA or other institutions like ISA. They could bring images and lower prices.
Okay. So in other words, we have to become a better consumer of those particular items. One of the proposals were to, within the regional aspect, to try to share also thoughts, to establish structures in order to see how we can reach those tools in a more rational way. I have to say that USA has a program, the Integrated Space Technology, coming back to the integrated approach from space application. And Alice mentioned this morning a few pilot projects within this integrated framework. Do you want to add something particular to that, Alice?
Yes, please. Thank you for recognizing the integrated space application efforts. That's the way to go, because one thematic area cannot really stand alone. For example, the disaster doesn't stand alone. Disaster has something to do with the environment, with telemedicine, with, like today, the global warming, the climate change. The disaster could cause disaster. And this has something to do with also with the solar system's impact to the Earth. So this has something to do with the basic space science. You go back to the very basic. So you can see that all the thematic areas are really coordinated together. So if you talk about disaster, we shouldn't exclude the other factors.
Return for that dissemination problem.
Actually, for Thailand, we have the electronic delivery. That one thing is our mechanism to build for the dissemination, data dissemination. If you my colleague presentation, you have seen that. That is the we are trying to to open access for our user community from the server. From the server, you can see the map server. You can see my colleague presentation. This is open for the our people to access, to get the data for disaster free of charge.
Free of charge.
Free of charge. For the national, benefit, you cannot charge, but free of charge. And my colleague actually, he is expert of the server, the map server. We build the map server and put everything on the, especially for the disaster. We put everything on the server, and our user can access. Even the other government department who have the mandate to deal with the disaster, they can access. At the same time, we deliver the in form of media as well.
Okay.
Both.
Okay. Thoughts about dissemination?
Yes, actually, I would like to congratulate my colleague from Thailand for setting a very good precedence on for the others to follow. In fact, I think that's a very good model, but in the limited limited context of data dissemination that we have in our country, we do have certain limitations. In the sense, I mean, it's not free, at least to that extent.
No, not true.
But it's not a major bottleneck because, I mean, though it's not free, it can easily be obtained with the comparative degree of ease. So, my reflection on that would be that at the initial stages of evolution, we need to have a mechanism where the dissemination of data has to be relatively free.
Okay. More contributions from the floor? Yeah, Philippe.
I have a sense that we see some countries having a very good service on one area, other one on electronic dissemination. Is there any way, as you're going to talk to the big bosses next week, to come back with very precise recommendation that says, look, my friend over the Latin American side is doing this, we need this sort of thing in our country as well. Is there any way, that's one, the first point. The second point, is there any way, you mentioned modeling, it's a very good model, but in my case I have to adapt this and that. Is there any model at all that we can use taking the best of each? Because everyone has its own experience. So we've heard different experience. So is there any way you can come back with very specific recommendation to the panel next week, identifying what's the best in each area?
Well, that is an important suggestion. Please, you are the panelists. Say your thoughts. Maybe, please.
Well, I think I'm not an expert in communication, but I'm aware that in Nigeria that the relevant agencies in information communication are working together to improve internet access in Nigeria up to village level, and they have emerged a lot of local government areas to cover through this program. And if this project is completed, I'm sure this will improve in a way.
But do you think that it's a possibility, following Philip's concern, is it a possibility of a unique model that, or to try to have at least a regional type of model, because situations are different in every part of the world? Do you think we can reach some kind of modeling? And additional to that, what we can recommend to the space agency directors next week to do something in that particular respect?
Well, people say figures are not equal, because, however, we still need to develop within the context of our financial resources, even if that is recommended to the big boss. But what has been promoted in Africa, which I know very much, and recent has been a subject of discussion in many international fora, many regional fora, is the development of spatial data infrastructure, which can improve data sharing and then dissemination. I think it's a subject that Africa and the rest of other developing countries needs to consider very well.
The
development of spatial data infrastructure. I think it's a major area that you can use to tackle some of these.
Yes, because Mr. Rao mentioned that one of the important aspects is to realize that we have to develop national infrastructure. Without that, it's impossible to have international cooperation. But to reach a national body, a domestic body, we need also to have some cooperation from outside. We need to have cooperation to develop spatial data infrastructure. So that could be one of the recommendations. In countries which is needed to try to help in that particular area. You say, Philip, you want to add additions? You want to add something to that particular aspect?
Well, I heard in the beginning, I think our friend from Peru is really mentioning a different mode of emergency.
Yes.
There's a fire guy, the national people who are really actually reacting on something, and those who are providing the remote sensing operation is more equally in the same level of response time. And then you have all the other ones which are looking at data collections and data history and who are more in the analysis, they're in a different mode. So I wonder if what you're talking about is not that national body that liaises all that, and not only the remote sensing, as Sergei said, but that also include experience in global localizations and navigation, so you can, and communication. So integrated there, it becomes more like an integrated application center that has as a mode of reaction the mode that is needed from the civil protection area, and not the research centers which have longer perspective.
It's interesting appreciation. You want to say something about that?
Well, I agree with him. I think dissemination and bringing this kind of information depends on the acknowledgement of people who works in agency which have to do with disasters. So if they don't know how to use, how to manage this kind of tools, so information doesn't work. It is necessary to these people have the knowledge in order to use the information in order to exploit it.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put on a different hat and put on my Malaysian hat.
That's good.
This is about dissemination of information.
Yeah.
And with the recent tsunami that occurred, there is of course the situation where you would have to inform the people by the beaches, the resorts and all that. And so what the government did was to negotiate with the mobile telephone service providers that certain messages coming from the Division of Security, National Security, it will only come from them, and we will be sending text messages to certain people in certain cells. We have certain mobile user cells. So if they are being targeted for messaging, that the service providers will transmit those messages free of charge. And this is incorporated in the license when they apply for a license from the government. That when in a disaster situation, certain messages should be transmitted to the public free of charge.
Fantastic. Okay. I think the security for music will tell you that I have to reach the end. But I would like to ask Noemi and Joseph if the questions here or correspond with what has been discussed in the particular working group. Just for me to be satisfied that we have covered at least the main part of your work there in the group. Please, if you can share with us.
I think it's been a very good start given the constraints of time, and I think it's an excellent place to move forward from. I think the discussions we've had gives us a better understanding of the constraints within the different regions, and I think that understanding is a wonderful place to start collaboration. So I think we've done very well given what we've had to work with today.
So you think yes? Okay. Well, I have to say that I am very impressed by the complexity of the subject. Subject is very incredible complex. you have, I was thinking in the pre-Columbian beliefs, the Pachamama. Pachamama is the kind of mother nature that has strong characteristics. One of them is one can have reaction, unexpected reaction from the Pachamama. They don't respect borders, they don't respect time, they don't respect economical, social, cultural levels. It hits whenever she likes it. And then how we humans can react to this particular question is a strong, big challenge. And the United Nations and this particular workshop is a tool. Even if we cannot reach final conclusions, it's very hard to have a model, it's very hard to have different conclusions taking into account the diversity, the regional diversity. That is an impressive dimension on that. But it's a good start. I really believe it's a very good start. We have to continue. I think one of the important aspects is to the message that the United Nations and the international bodies, in general terms, have tools to help countries. And we have to know each other better, how to improve and how to use them. I would like then to thank you, to thank everyone here, this group of panelists, brilliant panelists, and also every one of you here, the organizers,